If you go to school in the United States of America, it's not uncommon to learn the names of all 50 states and their capitals. Depending on your age, you might have listened to some catchy songs, used flashcards, or just wrote them down again and again until you remembered them. That last approach is actually how I learned them. I can't honestly say it's all that effective, but I understand it's supposed to serve a purpose. It informs us as Americans of who we are. It helps us appreciate regions, cities, and the vast history behind them. Ideally, knowing our states, capitals, cities, and landmarks, it's meant to give us all a sense of place and identity. But this is not an ideal world. Even some of the most basic facts about a country can be subject to certain complications. In terms of a relevant example, considering the following sets of historical knowledge. On March 18, 1959, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the Hawaii Admission Act of 1959. In June of that same year, residents of Hawaii voted on a referendum on whether to become a state. The referendum passed by a wide margin with 132,773 in favor to just 7,971 votes against. And finally, on August 21st, 1959, President Eisenhower signed a proclamation and Hawaii officially became the 50th state of the United States of America. Everything I just mentioned can be easily found in a standard history textbook, or gleaned from numerous online sources. And yes, all of that really did happen. I'm not here to claim the history of Hawaii is somehow wrong, a conspiracy, or anything like that. But I am singling out this historical tidbit for a reason. Because, true as it may be, there are some complications, and no, you won't find those particular facts in any textbook, website, or historical documentation. But Hawaii being the 50th state isn't the issue here. It's this notion that it's the last state America accepted into the Union that's incomplete, for lack of a better word. And no, that's not by accident either. There's a sizable chunk of history that tends to be purposefully buried, sometimes by powerful figures within powerful institutions, other times by forces beyond anyone's control. Every nation that has ever existed has history like that, much of which we'll never uncover. But in this case, it's not the sort of thing that can stay buried. In fact, it's only ever been a matter of time before the truth about America's last state comes out. And by that, I'm not talking about Hawaii. I guess this is the part where I'll need to establish some credibility. Because if I just came out and said there's actually a 51st state of America that few people know about, you'd probably think I'm crazy. You'd think I'm just another faceless voice on the internet telling stories that only someone equally crazy would believe. But I promise you, this is no random story. This is a dire warning from the past that's bound to impact the near and far future. And if you happen to be American, it's going to affect you more than most. Now, the reason I know this is because I have, or rather had, a high-level security clearance. But I'm not just talking about the kind that involves a standard background check. This kind of clearance was what allowed me access to information not meant for public consumption at any point, no matter what reporters, laws, or conflicting policies may say. You don't really need to know the specifics. Just know that getting this level of clearance is a big deal. Talk to anyone else who has gone through the process, be they FBI, CIA, Secret Service, or certain specialized government contractors. They're all subject to a thorough, exhaustive, and overly invasive process. And that's for jobs that don't involve history-destroying information. To say it's thorough would be the understatement of a century. Pretty much every aspect of your life, going back to grade school, is scrutinized by well-paid bureaucrats eager to flag anything of note. When I went through it, someone actually contacted my old kindergarten teacher to investigate an incident where I allegedly stole scissors to work on an art project in another class. It wasn't true, but the fact that anyone knew about that incident is pretty telling. Then again, I had more advantages than most when it comes to getting a clearance. Beyond just being a fourth-generation military man, my father was also in the Secret Service. I won't say who he protected or which presidents he served under. Just know that when he retired, he got some handwritten letters that we had to seal in a bank vault, mostly because those letters have only become more valuable with time. But my father isn't the only reason I got the job I once had, as well as the necessary clearance to do it. I still had to earn it, and that meant graduating at the top of my class at a private military academy, making my way through the officers' corps at the Navy, and eventually landing a position at the Office of Naval Intelligence. That being said, I don't doubt for a second that being my father's son influenced the people who granted me my security clearance. And while I don't know this for sure, he may have played a role in guiding my career a certain way. Because he really did consider himself a true American patriot. To him, a patriot does right by his country, even when the people running it fail to live up to American ideals. Looking back on it, I think he knew I was eventually going to do something like this. Break every rule, duty, contract, and oath I ever took to reveal this information. Because even if he didn't know the secret of America's 51st state, he definitely would not stand for keeping those secrets buried for so long. As for how I got access to those secrets, well, that's a long story that's not nearly as important as the when, why, and how of this unique American state. Its origins actually predate the United States, the colonies, and even early European explorers. It also doesn't have a traditional boundary or landmass per se, but it can be accessed through a single point. That point just happens to be a small island off the west coast of Oregon. Its name has changed a lot over the centuries, but the people who live there, they call it Divinia. That's the most accurate translation anyone's been able to come up with, but what it is and who occupies it, that was largely the stuff of myths, folklore, and urban legends. The first reference, in the context of America at least, came from the Chinook tribe. In fact, Lewis and Clark themselves were the first to document their stories of Divinia. Multiple chiefs and shamans told tales of fishermen getting lost at sea, landing on some strange island and encountering these shadow people, as they called them. The nature of these encounters often varied, depending on any number of factors from how many were present, whether they were men or women, and if they had weapons on hand. But even in the worst of circumstances, these shadow people were never hostile for the most part. They were just very intimidating. That's the one consistent theme that seems to hold true in every story. I personally read a letter penned by Meriwether Lewis himself, saying that these people could make an entire family of grizzly bears cower in their presence. I'm not sure how much of that was embellished, but the more I read about Divinia, the more I feared how accurate that might have been. In terms of what these shadow people did to those who ended up on Divinia, it usually went like this. They would take the intruder to the center of their island. From there, the person would become disoriented. The next thing they know, they find themselves in this other place, when they can only be accessed through a special cave. From there, these shadow people ask them a series of questions, mostly about where they're from, what's happening in their land, and, most importantly, what is changing. And if the person answers honestly and directly, they're released. They're even given food, a new boat, and even some precious gemstones for their troubles. But they're also given a warning. It always went something like this.
Do not seek out Divinia or its people. We will make ourselves known when we choose to.
Those who heeded that warning made it home safely. They continued living their lives and sharing their story, but those who tried to find Divinia again, that never worked out. It wasn't just a matter of individuals or groups trying to locate the island. If just one person went searching for it, the whole tribe had a tendency to disappear. Now, that was plenty to discourage most natives, but it did little to discourage American explorers. However, Meriwether Lewis still made it a point to convince President Jefferson to keep Divinia a secret. This was not just another dangerous group of natives. This was something much more serious, and how they dealt with Divinia could seriously affect America's future. He ended up being right in that regard, just not in the way he intended. In the years and decades that followed, more envoys and diplomats were sent in search of Divinia. They were always done in secret, usually under the guise of coastline mapping and naval expeditions. Less than half of those efforts ever made it to Divinia, but those that did, they added much more detail than the accounts of the natives. By the 1850s, enough people had made it there to paint a more accurate picture of this place and its people. Even with detailed drawings, letters, and a few early photographs, it's hard to believe that a place like Divinia exists. Once you get to the island and through the cave, you find yourself in a world within a world, complete with lakes, rivers, mountain ranges, valleys, and creatures unlike anything ever seen before. Multiple people have tried to determine its size. I think in terms of sheer content, Divinia exceeds every American state by a comfortable margin. Beyond the strange otherworldly landscape, there are also cities, buildings, roads, and structures not made by nature, but not made by any known human society. The natives claimed it was like entire mountains had been transformed into hive-like structures to shelter vast societies. Other visitors say they were like metal pyramids linked with networks of artificial forests. What made them artificial? Well, I'm afraid that's a bit beyond my expertise. But like the natives before them, the American envoys got the same treatment. They were given questions to answer, and if they answered in a way that was truthful and satisfying, they got sent home with provisions and even a few precious gems for their troubles. I can attest that more than one diplomat became rich from that exchange. But around 1860, Divinia's interest in America's development changed. About 9 months before the Civil War broke out, an emissary of Divinia sought out then-President James Buchanan. It wasn't by letter or telegram either. According to one of Buchanan's most trusted advisors, this individual appeared in the middle of the night within the Oval Office and in the president's chair, no less. Even in the days before the Secret Service, it sent a clear message. Divinia was much more capable of seeking us out than we were of seeking them. But what he told Buchanan represented a turning point in America's relationship with this strange land. It was later documented by Buchanan himself in a memorandum that only 5 individuals have ever laid eyes on. That includes me.
The people of Divinia have been watching the United States closely, just as they have with every tribe, nation, empire, and coalition. But never before have we seen a nation grow so quickly yet incur so much strife. We believe your country is at a turning point. How it pans out will greatly influence whether Divinia continues to share dialogue. And let me make clear that we want that exchange to continue. If you become the country we think you can be, then we look forward to having a more fruitful relationship. But if you ultimately follow what we deem to be a destructive path, then expect a significant and decisive recourse. For we in Divinia understand that for the world to remain intact, chaotic forces must be neutralized, harshly.
Even after over 150 years, it comes off as a not-so-subtle threat. Before then, Divinia never demonstrated the extent of its capabilities. But in the notes of this same memo is a disturbing description of what happened when a bodyguard attempted to apprehend the emissary. Only managed to grab the figure by the arm for an instant. What happened after that is difficult to discern. I'm still not sure if the notes in the letter were exaggerated or the result of pure shock. But they describe the emissary neutralizing the guard. I still don't know what that entailed. I just know that the guard ended up with both his legs and arms broken, all his fingers dislocated, his left eye half gouged out, and 5 broken ribs. Believe me, the sketch made by the White House doctor is not something you can ever unsee. Brutal as it might have been, it raised the stakes for the Civil War. I even think it played a part in Buchanan not running for president again. I can't confirm that he told Lincoln about the incident before he took office. I honestly believe that motivated Lincoln even more to win the war for the North. He was convinced that Divinia would see the failure of the Union as a threat to them, and one they would not hesitate to neutralize. I still shudder to think what that might have entailed, even by the standards of the time. But I guess things played out exactly as Lincoln and Divinia had hoped. The North did indeed win, and Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction was even supported by a Divinian ambassador. It sparked the first real discussion about Divinia becoming a state. I personally had a letter penned by Lincoln himself expressing hope that this would cement the future of the Union. This one quote at the end still sticks with me. "It is truly by the grace of God and righteous men that the United States remains united. We are now in a position to not only relegate the practice of slavery to the dustbin of history, we have a burgeoning partnership with the people of Divinia to further strengthen our unity. They have shown me examples of a great future of free men of every race and creed, and building that future goes beyond simply welcoming new states into this new American Union." Reading this, I can't help but agonize over what could have been. Because 2 weeks after penning this letter, Lincoln was killed at Ford's Theater. Believe me, that did not go over well with anyone from Divinia. And when Andrew Johnson abandoned much of Lincoln's Reconstruction plans, any notion of future statehood went out the window, at least for a time. A part of me still wonders whether Divinia's possible statehood played a part in Lincoln's assassination. Yes, John Wilkes Booth was still the killer, and his reasons for doing so are well documented. But even though Divinia's existence was largely a secret, There were those who saw it as a threat. The idea that this place could exist outside the country and exact so much influence was disturbing to many, and understandably so. But they didn't understand Divinia or its people. I doubt they even wanted to understand. That ignorance is what informed America's relationship with this secluded domain for decades to come. Yes, diplomats still made regular visits. Divinia still welcomed them. But the people of this land had no desire to affect the course of the United States beyond a certain point. But that all changed during World War II, as did a great many things during that time. Just like the Civil War, the people of Divinia took an interest in the outcome. More than one representative visited President Roosevelt over the course of the war. They also made clear that they wished to avoid certain outcomes. One particularly sensitive telegram from the president's bodyguard revealed the stakes.
The people of Divinia have never witnessed a world so close to utter ruin. We are ready and able to make our presence felt should Allied forces continue to falter. And make no mistake, Mr. President, we do not want that outcome. Neither you nor any citizen of any nation wants that. Our methods would require a great deal of restructuring, a kind that would be unnecessary but unwelcome by the populace. So please, do not make us pursue this recourse. Find a way to win this war on your own terms. Otherwise, we will end it on ours.
The date of that telegram is February 19th, 1942. Things were not looking good in Europe or the Pacific at the time. But, through grit, tactics, and a little bit of luck, the tide was turned. The Allies rallied, and the Axis powers were defeated. While many in America celebrated, those within Divinia tempered their relation. Because what happened in the years after the war, that set the stage for the dire situation we're in now. All that post-war prosperity that so many are nostalgic for, that rapid and unprecedented ascendancy of America's dominance in the post-war order, I honestly don't think enough people appreciate how unique this was in the grand scheme of history. If ever there was an opportunity to create a lasting, stable order for this country and others, this was it. And Divinia wanted to help. Whereas Truman was elected to accept it, which ended up playing a part in the Korean War going poorly, President Eisenhower embraced the opportunity. He, along with President Kennedy, followed the optimism of the time, going so far as to create an embassy within Divinia. The plan this time would have gone beyond statehood. Divinia promised to reveal more of its secrets, while also providing access to its vast resources. In one classified document from the Pentagon, a Divinian engineer demonstrated how a special gem could function as a battery, one capable of powering anything from cars to tanks to TVs to starships. Another offered to supplement America's nuclear arsenal, which would have advanced weapons technology to a point where war at any level would have been unnecessary. I only ever saw schematics, but one general claimed that they had weapons that could shoot the apple off Nikita Khrushchev's head from the dark side of the moon. That would have meant no more Koreas, no Vietnam, and certainly no further threat from the USSR. And it's here where the country that I love, the country that I dedicated my life to serving, likely doomed itself and all future generations. It all began in April of 1961. In that same month, President Kennedy signed a secret executive order, permitting Divinia as the 51st state of the United States of America. The ambassador confirmed that their people supported this with near unanimous consent. Divinia becoming an American state would mutually serve their interests at every level. And at long last, Divinia could make themselves known to the world, something they'd been eager to do for hundreds of years. The president even sent his brother, Bobby Kennedy, this encrypted message for how Divinia's statehood would guarantee the next century of American prominence. Much has been said about the people of Divinia. Some go so far as to question whether or not they are fully human. But you and I have both stood in their presence. We have both seen what they can do. They believe themselves to be the key to securing humanity's future. And if America is that key, then I can think of no greater legacy. But less than a week after that message was sent, it all fell apart. A general within the American military, to date nobody knows who, decided that this wasn't a good enough legacy for the United States of America. And whether by arrogance or malice, he conspired with a number of like-minded patriots, as they called themselves, and killed the individual who was set to be Divinia's first American governor. Like so many other activities associated with Divinia, it happened in the dead of night, and within the most secure areas of the White House, no less. This figure who had become a close ally of Kennedy wasn't just attacked. Multiple men, at the behest of this rogue general, brutalized this innocent citizen of Divinia as he slept in a guest bed. How they succeeded, that's still not clear. We do know they came in with guns and grenades. One report even claimed that the general himself stole one of the gems that Divinia gave the Pentagon to study. But however it unfolded, the result was still the same. All the men involved died, including the general, and the future governor of Divinia ended up shedding blood on American soil. And despite the best efforts of Kennedy's doctors, he passed away. That effectively ended any hopes of further partnership between America and Divinia. It also doomed our future in ways few will ever truly grasp. Not enough people know what this mystery land had to offer in terms of its people, its resources, and its influence. But we soon got a taste. Because the day after this incident, the infamous Bay of Pigs invasion occurred. While its failures are well documented, the true extent is much harder to quantify, because Divinia made sure that it was just the first of many. The numerous other upheavals that America would soon face, the political, military, social, and diplomatic shortcomings that would undermine its ideals, Divinia would end up having a hand in all of it. Now, to his credit, President Kennedy tried to salvage the relationship. But when that didn't work, he threatened to expose Divinia to the world. He even intended to make a speech about it on November 23rd, 1963. I hope I don't need to remind my fellow Americans of what transpired the day before that. But during that same week, the embassy of Divinia was abandoned. Everyone who occupied that structure was forced out. But before they left, those who had worked there, many of whom had seen the wonders and horrors of this secret state and its people, ended up witnessing a precursor of our inevitable doom. One man in particular documented his final journey out of Divinia. He described these people, who had always been intimidating but peaceful, as transforming before his very eyes. It confirmed to him what many already suspected. The residents of Divinia were not entirely human. There was something more to them, something within them that seemed tied to the mystery land they inhabited. When they wanted to be peaceful, they were like angels, capable of offering compassion, salvation, and hope for a future like no other. But when they wanted to be hostile, they could be demons, and no, I don't mean that metaphorically. This same man, who was probably the last human to set foot on Divinia, claimed every citizen's eyes became red with rage as he left. And when they yelled at him, their voices echoed with a truly venomous hatred. They were like a hive of killer insects who had just watched someone attack their queen, and they were ready to swarm, but in a very specific manner. Because it wouldn't just be enough to retaliate. Oh no, that would be over too quickly. Instead, Divinia would make America and its people pay a much higher price. Its punishment would be slower and more drawn out. They would see to it that we regularly and repeatedly failed to live up to our ideals. Every brief period of prosperity would be fake and fraudulent. Every bit of progress would be a lie meant to prolong the coming agony. And the endgame was simple. Bide time until the moment was right, and then strike in a single decisive blow, one that would bring us all to our collective knees, lamenting and agonizing over our shared failure. And those from Divinia, the lost American state, would see to it that we all remained on our knees. How do I know all these details? And how did I confirm everything I just told you? How exactly did I confirm everything that I just revealed? Well, it wasn't just my very advanced clearance that I inevitably lost. It was also because that man, the last one to leave the embassy that day, was my grandfather. He was tasked with delivering the final message from Divinia to America. That message never made it to the president, but it still ended up in my father's hands, and eventually into mine. As I share this story, I'm actually holding it in my hands, and those hands are trembling, not just because I'm aware of the secret history of America's lost state, but because I also know how hard the American government has been working to avoid this fate. But make no mistake, their efforts will not work. Of that, I am certain. That's why I'm making some preparations of my own. I encourage others to do the same. And if you don't believe me, then at least heed the final message from the people of Divinia that my grandfather left me to share.
For centuries, our land has been a seed of hope, waiting to blossom. We, the people of Divinia, transcend the limitations of tribes, nations, and empires, becoming more than our flesh, greater than our individual identity. We believed there would come a time when the rest of humanity would share in this hope. We watched so many civilizations rise and fall, never seeing one capable of guiding the rest of humanity towards our shared light. Then the United States of America came along, and we thought this was it. This was the nation we were waiting for. We watched it grow through the toils of revolution, civil war, and petty bigotry. We wanted it to succeed. We tried to help it succeed, willingly becoming one of its states. But in the end, it failed like all the others. Its high ideals were not enough to overcome the inherent darkness of humanity's soul. Now, instead of hope, we shall bring dread. Instead of allies, we shall be enemies. And instead of its ultimate saviors, we shall become its greatest monsters. From the shadows, we will strike, guiding you to a slow but inescapable doom. And when the time comes, when the world needs America to be at its best, we will make our presence felt. And that beautiful dream that was once America will become the world's greatest nightmare.